No, the title of this video is not a typo. This is actually a game that exists. Now some of you, especially if you're a certain age, may be familiar with the idea that if you randomly slap ninja onto the title of something, you'll magically increase excitable children's interest in the product by at least 200%. You may know such legendary microcomputer games as Alternative's BMX Ninja or Silverbird's Ninja Scooter Simulator. Of course, neither of those games actually bear any relation at all to ninjas when you play them. Hell, Ninja Scooter Simulator is, in fact, a clone of Namco's arcade game Metro Cross. And of course there's Ninja Golf on the Atari 7800, perhaps the silliest sounding game of them all and one that's, well, actually not too bad. Hey, it's got ninjas in it for a change. And here we have an example from the arcades. Ninja Clowns, a 1991 game published by Strata. You may remember the name of Strata from classics such as Time Killers and Bloodstorm, and if so then you know we're in for a real treat here. I guess that the first reaction to hearing a name like Ninja Clowns is, why? I mean, why on earth does such a thing even exist and how does it stop? I suppose that in the context of this being a beat 'em up from August of 1991, the answer is fairly easy to work out. 1991 is still within the period of Turtle Mania. Konami's beat 'em up starring the Turtles was one of the most successful arcade games around, so why not make a game that's, well, influenced by it? Perhaps you're a thrifty operator who wants something to keep those turtle-loving kids coming back to your arcade after they've finally worn out the TMNT machine, so give them Ninja Clowns. Perhaps that's what Strata were banking on. They are, after all, not the most original of arcade studios around, especially when you consider the games by them I've previously mentioned. It's more accurate to describe Strata as a publishing label more than a studio, really. The actual studio behind all of their games was the Illinois-based Incredible Technologies, and they used the Strata label for a few years before ditching it in around 1995. Incredible Technologies, who are still around today, are unquestionably most famous for their Golden Tee series of golf games, which began all the way back in 1989 when they were using the Strata label. And hey, whatever your opinion is on Golden Tee and the like, any company that's been able to ply a trade in the arcade business for nearly 40 years, and independently at that, certainly deserves a bit of respect. But of course we're not talking today about anything good that Incredible Technologies have done. Lest we forget, we're talking about Ninja Clowns, and I'm sure you're all eager to know just what this game's all about. The flyer for the game promises us that an awesome legend's going to come to life, and sums up the plot well enough. A thoroughly evil clown named Twisto has taken control of the city of Centersville and its inhabitants, and only the Ninja Clowns can stop him from taking over the world. The flyer also promises us things like side-scrolling views of wild and strange characters, and amazing animation with sounds to match. Yeah, we'll see how that goes, shall we? There's not a whole lot to say about the Attract mode. You get a title screen that makes it look like you're about to read a comic, and you're straight into the action as soon as you chuck a coin in and whack the start button. And while it may be tempting to take one look and run straight back out of the action, we must persevere and see just what this weird title's all about. It may only take a few seconds to correctly summarise Ninja Clowns as cheap and nasty Turtles knockoff, but it's worth playing through just to see how ridiculous things are going to get. Violent J here, or whatever, he doesn't have an actual name, has several attacks at his disposal, from the basic punch and kick, some flying attacks, a couple of jumping attacks, and a special spinning top move that doesn't actually eat into your health, but gets slower and more useless every time you use it. That's at least a bit different. The controls are, well, they're as good as they look, I'm afraid. The game's really sluggish, and all of these moves are quite shockingly stiff. That and most of them are absolutely useless. Bozo here has virtually no range with almost all of his attacks, which hardly helps against the mobs of enemies. The only attack that's particularly useful is a rolling one. This is basically the clown's only attack that has any serious range, so you'll probably be spamming it a lot. Oh, and every time you hit someone with it, a loud bowling ball effect plays. This gets rather irritating, as you can imagine.
I'm gone.
A slightly more unique incompetence about Ninja Clown's controls is that you actually have 3 buttons, labelled punch, kick and throw. If you use throw, Pagliacci sticks his hand out in what appears to be a block, but is actually just completely useless. If you have a weapon, hitting the button will cause him to use his weapon attack. However, you can do the same thing just by using the punch button. This third button then is completely redundant and useless. And as for throwing, well, there are no grab attacks in this game whatsoever. So yeah, we are at a pretty low level here, I'm afraid. One thing that's also obvious fairly quickly is that while this game certainly has clowns covered pretty thoroughly, well, what about the ninjas? Where's that part of the equation? Yeah, aside from the odd hee-ah sound effect, there's nothing very ninja about these clowns at all. Our hero just looks like, well, a clown. The game should really just be called Clowns, but as we all know by now, doing that wouldn't be nearly as marketable, would it? You don't even get to fight any ninjas, in fact, although you certainly do get a pretty wide rogues gallery of fiends to duke it out with. Much like the clown you're playing as, they're all rather grotesque looking, but there's a lot of folks to take on. Why, there's angry cops, hoodlums, lawyers, hippies going against their peace-loving principles, evil Girl Scouts and their dangerous cookies, vomiting bearded ladies, zombified Elvis impersonators wielding accordions, deranged corndog chuckers, and there's even more fun to be had with the bosses. The first level ends with a Donnybrook against an evil 10-pin bowler who sadly doesn't shout that whoever you think you are, he is, and it just gets stranger from there with a furious man in a chicken costume who craps eggs out at you, magicians with exploding rabbits, a vicious fire breather. There's a lot to unpack here. The sort of things you dream about after eating way too much cheese. While it's probably overselling Ninja Clowns to compare it to an existential nightmare, the variety of enemies is certainly the best thing about the game. I do kind of dig how, well, uncompromising they are in their ugliness. While Ninja Clowns isn't exactly a pleasant experience, you've got the nasty graphics, an absolute feast for the ears with obnoxiously loud and poor quality sound effects peppered all the way through, and completely uninspiring music that can barely be heard anyway, the occasional appearance of comic panels that explain the game's plot for whatever on earth that's worth, the fact that there appears to be all of 4 separate stage backgrounds with one of them, the street, being used 3 separate times, and thoroughly low quality gameplay that gets monotonous very quickly, it is at least a short one, even for a beat 'em up. You have a whole load of very tiny levels, and even if you end up dying a whole bunch, you'll probably reach the end in around about 20-25 minutes, and end up fighting the Great Twisto himself, a giant 3-headed evil clown monster who, like a lot of the goons in this game, can largely be hurt by relentlessly spamming the wall. You will, of course, not get much of a reward for beating this title. It's a single screen, a couple of comic panels showing that the citizens of Centersville have been released from Twisto's curse, and a game over. Yeah, I'm not sure if you can really expect much more than this from a game like this one, can you? In this day and age, especially when the arcades that are about now tend to be thoroughly curated and full of the sort of titles that people would actually want to play, it's easy to forget about the myriad of lousy cabinets like Ninja Clowns that most certainly did exist. The cheap and nasty stuff, the sort you'd encounter in a dingy seafront shed, or a machine you'd find on a trip to Europe that's not exactly in with all the adults-only Gals Panic-esque titles, but is just that little bit too close to them. To say that Ninja Clowns is a bad arcade game kind of goes without saying. That's just obvious. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's one of the worst games ever or anything like that, because it's really not. I've played plenty worse both in the arcades and elsewhere, and the high weird plus stupid factor is at least enough to push through the thin. Obviously this game didn't get anywhere. The prospect of a cheapo beat-em-up that would possibly attract kids who loved bigger and better games like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was clearly not one that enticed operators to pull their wallet out and stick this on the floor, and in all likelihood you're only going to experience Ninja Clowns for yourself if you fire up MAME and go looking for it. In the end, it's another pretty lousy game from Strata. In the grand scheme of their generally rubbish library, this would be better than the horrendously made Mortal Kombat ripoff where people's limbs fly off, although probably not as good as its somewhat better made and even gorier follow-up that Daniel Pesina decided to help advertise. As mentioned previously, the Strata brand only lasted up until around about 1994 or so, with Bloodstorm likely being the last game that featured the branding. After ditching it, Incredible Technologies happily continued on, primarily producing Golden Tee games, of which there are many. The series is still an enduring part of the arcade to this day, but hey, if ever it needs a bit of freshening up, well, there's still a couple of clowns that for some reason think they're ninjas who would surely be up for coming out of retirement. Hopefully you've enjoyed this look at a rather confusing affair, and until the next time, bye for now.